This week on Behind the Pulpit. Today we are joined by the Vosters, some of our world partners who serve in Cambodia. They are here and we spend a lot of the episode talking to them about their ministry in Cambodia.
Yeah, my name is Tom Vosters. I'm here with my wife, Alicia.
We've been serving in Cambodia since 2017, and we've been part of Millington Baptist's World Partner Group since we left.
And with the rest of our time, we will discuss Pastor Bob's sermon on Luke chapter 19 and tackle a missions-based theology sprint.
Because we're not just trying to find conversions. We're looking to have disciples who are multiplying disciples, who are in turn looking to plant churches that are reproducing.
Wherever you may be watching or listening to this today, we hope you're having a wonderful day. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's edition of Behind the Pulpit.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Pulpit for July the 1st, 2024. This is our first podcast in the month of July. And guess what? Pastor Dave decided to go on vacation. So he's somewhere in New Jersey on the beach, enjoying some time with his family, hopefully getting a tan. We'll see how he looks when he comes back next week. But we're glad that you're here, that you're joining us today. It's the 4th of July week, and hopefully you're going to get some time off. My name is Bob Urbig. I am your host, and as always, you can go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us, make some comments. We would love to interact with you. That would be wonderful. I am flying solo today hosting, but I do have some amazing guests over here to my left. I have the Vosters, some of our world partners who are joining us today. So welcome. Would you mind introducing yourself to our audience and our church family?
Yeah, my name is Tom Vosters. I'm here with my wife, Alicia, and we had the privilege and the honor, really, of sharing in this service yesterday, so kind of tied in with the sermon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tried to tie in nice and tightly there, so, yeah.
Yeah, so Alicia Vosters, and we've been serving in Cambodia since 2017, and we've been part of Millington Baptist's World Partner Group since we left.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, it's wonderful to have you here today, and I really appreciated hearing what you had to share in the service yesterday. Normally what we do, as we were talking before on our podcast, we kind of do an intro like we just did, and now we usually do a guest spotlight. So we're going to spotlight you for most of this episode here today. What's interesting is maybe you could share a little bit about how you got into missions. We were talking before we started recording about your life pre on the mission field, and maybe share a little bit of that story so people can see the way God works.
Yeah, we came to faith as we were actually engaged, looking to find a church to get married in. And we both heard the gospel clearly, kind of continued on that process. And missions wasn't something that was kind of in the forefront of our mind. We were both kind of involved in our own careers, and we were looking to just kind of fulfill that American dream. 2 kids, 2 cars, a house.
White picket fence?
Yep. Well, we didn't have the fence, I guess, but it was just short of that.
It was coming.
Okay. You had a contractor ready to go.
But as we continued to kind of faithfully walk along the journey that the Lord put before us, missions was just something that was at the core of our sending church, Warrington Fellowship Church in Warrington, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And they had a missionary that they supported in Cambodia, and he had been there for a long time. So when the opportunity came up for a short-term missions trip to go and visit Cambodia, we kind of both looked at each other, and we're like, I think we need to go on this trip. And as we got to the process of planning it, we ended up going on a short-term missions trip in 2014. It took us 2 years to plan that trip and work through all the details and everything that was there. But really on that trip, they had said, anybody who's going, there were 7 of us, they said, everybody that's going, we want you to be at least have the potential of serving long term. And we're like, oh yeah, that's definitely for the other 5 people that are there.
Is that always how it works?
That's not us. But we said, okay, yeah, we'll continue to walk down that path.
You guys are going to do great on the mission field.
So after that trip, we kind of came home, and somebody that was working with us at World Team kind of coined the term spiritual discontentedness. Mm-hmm. Like we were just squirming in our seats. There was just something there that was not exactly it. So we continued to kind of meet with our mentors and pour in and have those conversations and the follow-up. And that's when they were like, yeah, I think God's calling you to the mission field. And
Wow.
I'll let you jump in this spot.
And I said no.
God's talking to you, but not me. No.
Right. Yeah, so I was not anywhere in the headspace of serving full-time, moving to Cambodia. I think a lot of it was two issues. One, the root of it was really fear. I had no concept as to what that process actually looked like, and I didn't really trust that God was going to walk us through that. And I just wanted control and the security and comfort of where I was. And so, as you were talking about in the sermon yesterday, it was really just about, I was giving a little bit to God of what I felt comfortable letting go of, but not everything. And so that was my spiritual walk at that point, was really just walking in obedience to what the Lord had called us to. And I remember praying after a friend kind of challenged me, and she said, if this is what God wants you to do and you don't do it, you're in disobedience to God's will, and you have to live with that. And I remember thinking, ouch, like that's kind of, that cuts deep. But it was true. And I had to spend some time really wrestling with the Lord, saying, I need to walk through each door that you open, and I will faithfully walk through that. But work with me, because I'm going to be praying you close them. Because there was a lot of fear in it, and I couldn't picture what that looked like. But the Lord was with me through that and put people in my life to help guide me in that. And by the time we were in partnership development, raising a support to go, I was fully on board and ready, and I would not change it for the world. Not anything I would have expected, not any close to the plan that I had, but God has really used that to help me grow in my faith as well.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a journey.
It's wonderful. It's amazing how many times in the Bible, and we've been doing this kind of extended study on Luke, in particular in the Gospel of Luke, that people were having this same conversation about, well, my life is my own, my possessions are my own. Luke focuses a lot on that. And the point that Jesus is often making is, come to me, surrender to me, take up your cross and follow me, which is a key verse in Luke. So thanks so much for sharing that. One of the things that I was also thinking as you were talking, you guys are with World Team. Maybe share a little bit about that mission organization, how you chose to go with them, and what you like about them.
Yeah, from the very beginning, we had this natural connection with World Team, partly because it was in the backyard of our sending church's property. So
natural.
It just kind of
right
fell
there.
in. Yeah. So we had a lot of connections from World Team just from the very beginning, just from the people in our congregation that were there, the opportunity to be discipled by some of the people that are involved with it. So when that next step or that position came, and World Team is also the people that helped us plan some of our short term, just because we had so many connections, that helped us give that clarity for it.
Yeah, they really helped us understand short-term missions and help our church have a strategy for what the purpose of short-term missions were, and a philosophy for ministry in that space. And so that really set an idea of how we do ministry moving forward, and it just kind of really resonated with us and what we saw in Scripture. Yeah.
So along with that, how did you develop a philosophy on short-term mission? Because I've heard some... there was a famous book that was written a few years ago called When Helping Hurts. You probably have read that.
We had to read it.
Which was, there you go. Which was basically being a little critical of short-term missions, that the mission trip is mostly for the people that are going. You go in for a week and you help and you feel good about yourselves, but then you leave everybody that's on the ground with everything else to do. So you're trying to help, but sometimes you can hurt because you're creating this cycle of dependence and not empowering the nationals in a lot of way. So how did you develop, what did you think about that book, having read it, and how did you develop a short-term mission philosophy that's healthy?
I would say
healthy.
Yeah, I would say that we definitely, I can speak for myself, I think that is true. We've seen the long-term lasting impacts be the heaviest for the people who are on that short-term trip. Even being someone who has gone on a short-term trip and been impacted by that experience. Yeah, we met a few people that were there. We climbed up a mountain, did a camping trip with the youth. We poured into some of the pastors, some of the other group that was there. We tried to help out and be there for what was happening naturally and come alongside and assist. I guess, the traditional idea or the thought of come in with a few tradesmen or take care of some physical, tangible things that need to be done. Oftentimes, there are nationals that can handle those things,
right.
and they can probably do it in a way that's contextually like the right way that it's done in that country. So oftentimes we may come in and say, oh, we're doing it the wrong way. It should be done this way. But we don't have a full understanding of maybe some of the cultural pieces or some of the other lasting effects that's there. So when it's done in partnership with a long-term missionary that's serving there well, and it's something that they're asking for, I think then it can be really beneficial and fruitful. If something is being kind of pushed or inserted into an area that it doesn't quite fit or it's not really there, I think that's when some of the challenge is. I know when we hosted our first like short-term team that came from a different church, they were wrestling like, what are we going to do when we get there? And one of the things that we really wanted them to experience is let's let you get on the kind of how we're talking about the other side of the pulpit here. What's the other side of the missionary's eyes? Like, how can you come to this side and see what it's like? So that church actually coined this phrase. They said, well, that group that came back, it sounded like they went to Vosters missionary boot camp. So we put them through the paces of, we took them to language school for a morning. We took them to learn about culture. We showed them a few of the different museums and things that were there to help learn and understand about the culture. At the time, we were exploring what our dorm ministry would look like. So we were going and visiting many different dorms. And we had chosen a dorm to kind of partner with and pour ourselves into to see if this is where God was calling us. So we had that team then, in turn, also pour into that dorm and start to have connections with those students.
Yeah, it's when that church wanted to have a short-term trip, we were new to that church, and they were new as a church serving in Cambodia. And so we really worked with them to talk about, well, what's the purpose of this trip? What are your goals? What are our goals? We didn't have a ministry for them to come and help us with. We were 2 years into our time on the field. We were learning language, and they had a lot of really seasoned missionaries within their church. And so they said, yeah, we don't really know what it's like to start off being in ministry. And so that kind of set the stage for how we built that missions trip. And it's important, I think, to be in partnership with the ministry that you're going to serve, as well as what the goals of the church are. And there's a lot of learning that happens on both sides. And we've heard from people that were on that trip that God really did some pretty amazing things in their lives, just like the trip did for us. And that's okay. It doesn't have to always benefit the ministry you're going to serve. But I think there has to be a balance that you're doing things that are actually supporting what's happening within that ministry. And so they were able to share their testimonies. We did some crafts, but they really had a learning posture to want to receive information and understand what life in Cambodia looked like for the nationals and for the missionaries, so that they could be prayer warriors for us. They could be ambassadors for the ministries that were happening back in the U.S., and we've just seen so much fruit from that.
Yeah, one of the examples is we were on one of the bus rides back, because we had a little mini bus that everybody fit in. And we were coming back from one of the events, and traffic was a little bit messy. It was getting a little bit late, and then we were like, oh man, look at the time. Like, we're going to have to go pick our kids up from school. So we diverted the bus to go to the school to pick our kids up, because we weren't going to, the original plan was we drop them off, we then take our motos back home, and then we could go pick the kids up. So everything runs a little bit late in Cambodia, as many other parts of the world too. But so we took the bus to the school, and we said, well, since they're here, let's bring them into the school, and we'll show them where our kids go to school. And one of the people who were on that trip said, yeah, we kind of forgot that you're like normal people too. Like, you have to get your kids to and from school. You have to go grocery shopping. You have to do laundry. Like, you're not just doing all of the things that, I don't know what their expectations were of what a missionary does day to day.
You don't have assistants that do those things for you.
Yeah.
Or we're just not walking the streets evangelizing from sun up to sundown.
Right. You wake up and you walk out.
Yeah, there's those presuppositions that some people will have of what a missionary does each day. So that kind of helped form a healthy expectation.
Good. Well, why don't we, can we switch and talk a little bit about Cambodia itself? What's going on with the church in Cambodia? What's the sense of how God's moving? And I mean, obviously you're there working, and I'd love to hear about the dorm project kind of at the end here, but just give us a sense of Cambodia, the church. What's been your experience there?
Yeah, so big picture, people welcome having spiritual conversations. It's not something that's kind of hidden away or looked down upon. You can go and you can talk to people about spiritual things because that's kind of in the forefront of their mind. If there's challenge or trouble, they'll seek out supernatural power, and they'll be looking to find it. So that opportunity to share is really neat. One of the challenges is the back door. So you may get quick professions. If there's not good, solid discipleship that follows that up, then you can run into, well, how many believers do we have? I'm not sure. Like, what do the churches look like? Are they healthy? Are they strong? Are they wide, but there's no depth? So that's some of the challenges that's there. But as I think back, World Team has been in Cambodia since 1996. And we've had missionaries that have started. There's a few that came early on, a couple that are still serving. They've been there a long time. And I know, I think of Previhia province. They chose to go there because it was one of the darkest areas, the least reached. And now this is the example of the nationals who are doing the church planting. They're the ones that have gotten to the point where they're released and they're going out and reaching their neighbors. So there's fruit that's happening in a long haul of preparing the soil. We're actually starting to see some of that fruit that's there. So as we do have some new missionaries coming in, there's a few that are working with some of the minority people groups, and there's different works that's happening.
When you say minority
places.
people groups in Cambodia, what do you mean?
So the largest minority people group would be the Vietnamese.
Okay.
Outside of just Khmer, and then it gets to there's other tribal groups that are there. I can think of there's the Cham people group. There's Gui Brau, a few more up in the northern areas, and all of them have their specific separate languages. So one of the groups that I can think of a lot of fruit that's happening is with some of those minority groups. So finding to the point where there's a lot of resistance, and I think it was just the beginning of maybe with about a year ago at this time we were celebrating in one of those minority groups the first believer that was coming out, and we're actually hearing of how there might be a small handful. So talking about some of the hard groups, that's really, really encouraging to know that people have poured a lot of time and effort and energy, and to see the Lord show up in ways that's really, really encouraging.
Plow the soil, and then the fruit comes.
Yeah.
That's super encouraging.
Yeah, and connected with the dorm ministry, that was one of the reasons that we really felt drawn to this young adult group, is because while culturally there's a lot of differences, there's a lot that's similar globally. They have access to social media, they have cell phones, and they were starting to really explore spiritual things more globally outside of what was happening within their homes. And they were asking a lot of questions and seeking because they weren't being fulfilled in what they had received from their family in terms of tradition within the country and within their culture. And they just felt that there was something missing. They couldn't get their questions answered, so they were out looking. And so when we started to interact with students, a lot of what we were hearing was they were coming into the city for education. They were looking for ways to feel fulfilled and fill that emptiness. And as you start to engage with them about the truth of the gospel and who Jesus is and what he means in their lives, they really embrace that. But as Tom said, the biggest challenge is because they seek out supernatural powers, they want to add Jesus to their toolbox of gods that they can serve. And so we really spend time showing them that God is above all of that.
Right.
And
so what are the what's the religious landscape there? So what worldviews and other religions are you competing against? Does that present the biggest barrier to people coming to faith, or are there family connections? What are the barriers? What are the religions? Yeah.
So on the surface, I would say it's Buddhism.
Buddhism, okay.
Yep. So if you were to ask
Tibetan Buddhism,
I wouldn't give
different
it a specific piece because
Okay.
it's a little bit more open than that. Because when you really start to peel back the onion and you get underneath, there's more of the folk animistic beliefs and things that would happen.
Okay.
So as people start to encounter different challenges or problems, they'll seek out some of those different deities in the areas, or go to
When you say animism, just for people that might not know, can you give a definition for that?
So if I'm thinking through if I've got an exam coming up, thinking through on the university, like a practical example, and I'm really worried about it. So what am I going to do to try to find favor? So I may go to the local Wat, the temple, and offer a few fruit offerings or burn some incense, look to get a blessing from a monk, somebody that's there. Okay. But you're really trying to get one of those spirits that could help in that situation.
Okay. So you're appealing to the spirit to help you with your exam or whatever it may be.
Yep. Or the opposite of coming underneath one of those difficult situations to try to appease them to the point where you can be kind of left alone enough to have some kind of favor. So
gotcha.
It's almost, have I done enough? Am I seeing negative things that are happening? It may be a result of one of the spirits who's kind of coming after you and wanting to drag you down.
So another interesting question with that. So because that's prevalent there, has your view of spiritual warfare changed? Have you seen different things? Do you have stories?
Yeah, definitely. I think in Cambodia, supernatural powers, just the influence of the spiritual world is very much felt. And
did you feel that, is that a stark difference from Penn State to there?
Yes.
That's sort of what I was getting.
From our time, in the States and our experience of, I think as Westerners, we tend to look at science and for explanations to things. And in the East, particularly with Cambodians, like they don't look for the science. Something will happen and they will automatically assign that to a spiritual influence. And so that's why engaging in those conversations is very easy. But understanding where they come from and how to stand up against that is really where the gospel comes in. And so, we have conversations regularly about ghosts, about visions. We've had conversations about demon possession because they experience that. They see that. It's part of their culture. And even miraculous healings are seen often in the East because there's an openness to it to understand who God is in that and how God will work. And so I think he speaks to people in a way that they'll receive it. And in the East, it's through the spiritual powers.
Good. Could I go back to the dorm project? We gave a gift a couple years ago. Could you specifically talk a little bit about what that was, what it went towards? And we showed a video in the service yesterday about some impact there. But how did we support your dorm project, and what's the fruit specifically from that you've seen?
Yeah, so within our ministry, Tom and I had started that and saw a need, and we began to work with renting buildings and starting the project. And we had students coming in, and we were really seeking out a national partner that could work with us and help us bridge the gap in our language, in cultural understanding, and to help us disciple the students. And we had a young woman who came in who was actually connected to one of our other ministries. We had been working with her for a number of years, saw her faith, and she came in part-time to work with us. And we saw the need to go full-time, and we didn't have the finances at that point. We were new in the ministry. We were trying to pour into the students, and Millington Baptist sponsored her for her salary to allow us to take her full-time. And it was such a blessing because she has grown in such an amazing amount of ways in her faith and in her ability to minister and disciple to these students. And so that really set us on a trajectory and equipped us for when Tom was asked to take on our field leadership role.
Very cool.
And so she was our first hire and has been with our ministry for a number of years. And she's just doing some amazing things, helping our students.
What was her name again?
CNAT.
CNAT. Oh, that's right. I've seen a couple of videos. That's wonderful. Yeah. Awesome. Well, do you mind if I kind of pivot into the next segment? I think we can keep talking a little bit about your ministry in the context of maybe the sermon and whatnot. Is there anything else before I do that you'd want to share? I know we normally do this book segment. I know you said you're a reader. I don't know if you want to recommend a book. You can or you cannot.
Yeah.
I'll leave the door open for you.
Sure. I think just for me lately, I'm never up on the bestseller list or the newest things that are coming out, but a book that I think has been around for a while that has just really impacted me this year is called The Unhurried Life by Alan Fletting. And I've just been on this journey.
Sounds like a book I want to get.
Yeah, and I've been on this journey, I think, in this day and age with technology and everything being about efficiency and effectiveness and filling our time, I just really felt like I was constantly on the go and didn't know if I was really making any progress. Even with all the things that were happening in the ministry, in my personal walk, in my personal life, I felt like I was constantly missing things. And this book really talks about how you slow down and seek out what God has for you each day. And one of my favorite stories in the beginning is the analogy of two servants who are working for a king, and one wakes up in the morning and just goes about doing all the things they think that the king wants them to do. They're busy from sunup to sundown, and they're just exhausted at the end of the day, but they feel like, okay, I did everything I could in my power to serve the king. And then the other servant gets up and doesn't get up early. First thing they do is go to the king and say, what do you want me to do for you today?
Wow.
And that servant then does what the king asks and has a much more unhurried life because they're doing just what the king asked, not all the extra. Not trying to work out of their own energy and their own strength. And it just kind of really hit me. And I said, wow, I need to really practice this and slow down. And so that's kind of been my journey over this last year. And that book has been really impactful for me in processing busyness, even in my service to the Lord, with ministry and what I'm doing, because there's always a need. There's always something else to do, but it may not be what God actually has for me on that particular day.
Wonderful. So The Unhurried Life, and what was the author's name again?
Alan Fleding.
Alan.
A-L-A-N.
A-L-A-N. Fleding.
Yes, F-E-L-D-I.
It's an unusual last name. I was thinking
think.
Alan. What's the guy that wrote James Bond? Alan Fleming?
Ian Fleming.
Ian Fleming. There we go.
Yeah.
That's what I was
I
thinking.
think it's Fleding. I may be pronouncing
Fleding.
it wrong.
I'll look it up on Amazon and let you know later on. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate that. And just it was very cool to hear how the Lord is using your ministry over in Cambodia. Very needed. And by the way, those videos that you did, who did those? Did you? So it looked like there was some videography work in there.
Yeah, so we've utilized Ruang Studios. When Ruang is the Khmer word for story.
Okay.
So it's one of our friends that we've been in Cambodia kind of serving alongside with. And he kind of was there with a different mission and decided he was going to kind of branch off and start his own business, hiring all Khmer nationals and keeping things going. And we've just found that to be a really good blessing. We love the work that he does. He kind of gets it. He's been there with us. He understands the story that we're trying to pull out. And we've often just given him a lot of freedom and said, here's really big picture what we're trying to do. Like, we give him the creative freedom, and we let his staff even interview the dorm students, and oftentimes we don't even say what the questions are. We just give him that big picture idea, and he's really been great for helping to produce those videos for us.
Oh, well, they were really well done. I appreciate that. By the way, we have a videographer in the room right here, so maybe, Tim, you need to get connected with the studio over in Cambodia.
Yeah, they do some amazing work, and their goal is to create educational videos to promote the story of who God is, but also educational videos for schools and the nationals. And so this is a business as missions model where they want to create a sustainable business that can then serve the public and create some really great content. And so they're doing some pretty amazing things, and they've got a great following in Cambodia. So yeah, look them up. I think they do videos and music videos. They're really talented musicians as well. So they're on TikTok and YouTube, Instagram, all of the social media things. They've got them all.
So say it one more time. Urung? Is that how you say it? Urung?
Ruang.
Urung.
Yeah, it's kind of like the NG, like lasagna.
Oh, okay.
Ruang.
Right. Cool. Well, look them up. Maybe they can make a video for you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, let's move on to what we'll say is the back half of the episode right here. Normally we do a sermon review, so I think it was really nice that you were here yesterday. The sermon we were going through, the parable, I think tied in nicely with kingdom work, kingdom impact was a big focus on the parable of the 10 Minas. So let me give a quick overview of what we covered in there. And then Pastor Dave is not here, but I did whet his appetite with a bunch of charts. So I want to give you a couple charts that I think explain some of the concepts in the parable, and then we'll talk a little bit about maybe how to deploy your kingdom portfolio, which I think Tom and Alicia can help us think about. So we've been making our way through the Gospel of Luke, if you have not been with us. We are now at the end of chapter 19. Jesus next week will be entering into Jerusalem for the final week. So we'll look at the Passion, the Crucifixion, the Resurrection. That'll be our summer series. That's what we're going to be doing for the next 10 weeks. And then we will sadly come to the end of Luke and then dive into our Revelation study in the fall. So this section, Luke 14 to 19, had a number of parables as well as real-life stories, but it was very parable-heavy. And so yesterday was the last parable in this section, although not the last parable in the Gospel of Luke. And the parable of the 10 Minas is interesting. It is as my former New Testament professor Craig Blomberg says, it's a complex three-point parable, and he did a lot of work on the parables. So a lot of times you'll have three characters, you might have two characters. We actually had a lot of parables in this section that were very, two-person contrasting images. This one had three, and then one of those three was subdivided into two more. So do you mind pulling up that slide that has the different characters in the parable there, Tim? If you're able to. There we go. So this is the complex three-point parable. We had a nobleman, we had servants, we had citizens, and then those servants were subdivided into good servants and wicked servants. And ultimately, what we talked about was Jesus, in telling the parable as he's passing through Jerusalem, is taking some historical allusions to Archelaus the Great, who was King Herod's son, kind of comparing him to the nobleman, but also applying a lot of those principles to himself. That he was Jesus essentially playing the nobleman king who left, secured his right to rule by going to the emperor, his father, and then he comes back. So you have allusions to where Jesus is going. He's going to, go and die on the cross. He came to earth in the incarnation, die on the cross. He's going to leave and ascend up to the Father, and then one day he's going to come back and usher in his kingdom. And the point of the parable was he has given us work to do. We are to go engage in business. That's the call of the servants. But there's some who invest their kingdom assets for God's glory, and there's some who basically do nothing with their kingdom assets. That's the good servant and the wicked servant. And then you have all these citizens over here that are refusing to surrender their life to Christ and let him rule their life. And at the end, Jesus gives a very sobering point about judgment. So even there, you can see in me explaining it, it's a complex three-point parable. It's not super easy to understand and explain right away. One of the concepts, the theological concepts that's in the parable, if you go to that, can you go to that already not yet chart? So here's Pastor Dave's chart. Pastor Dave specifically asked for this one when I did the run-through because I was trying to explain this, and he said, you know what, you need to put a chart up there. And I like this one because it's not overly complicated. The section around the second coming of Jesus, there's obviously a lot of debated, timings and what all happens there. But the point of showing this is that we had the first coming of Christ, and we have a second coming of Christ. And in between, there's this overlapping of the ages. That's the thing I like about this chart. So you have this age, which is marked by the kingdom of darkness post-fall. And then you have the age to come, which is marked by the kingdom of light. And then ultimately, when Satan is defeated, and we get into the new heavens and the new earth, this age will pass away, the kingdom of darkness will be gone, and we will just be in the kingdom of light in the presence of God. But those overlapping ages, that in-between section, is what the Bible often calls the last days, and what theologians have termed the already. Like the kingdom of God has already come at Jesus' first coming, but the full kingdom is not here yet. So it's the already, the not yet, or what theologians call inaugurated eschatology. It's been inaugurated, but it's not fully come. That's in the future. So this idea of the nobleman leaving and then coming back is pointing to this in-between reality. And if you want to show up that simple chart that I had there, Tim, Here's just the simple chart. There's a first coming, there's a second coming, and we are in the in-between. We're in the the one that had the one that said the in-between faithfulness. Yeah, well, there we go. So we're in the in-between, and the call for all of us is to be faithful with our kingdom assets. And that was really the main point of the parable, I think. So this is kind of the simplified version of everything I just said. And we got into all these different details about how we manage our assets and how we serve the Lord and all that. So let me pause there, and you both listened. So did you have any questions or thoughts about this parable or about the sermon or what? And if you don't, that's fine. I'll move on to my next thought.
I'd say keep rolling.
All right. So we talked about 3 points, 3 things that were called. So the main question of the message was this: as we're waiting for the King to return, how should we live? And the 3 points we talked about were to take an inventory, to make an investment in your kingdom economy, and then to choose to increase your kingdom impact. So take an inventory, make an investment, and then keep increasing it. So the inventory thing, I think, for me was super helpful because, and I had a lot of people mention this to me after the message, that it was helpful to think about the wider array of your assets. And I cited a guy named Mike McKinley who wrote a commentary on this, talking about when you think about your kingdom assets, a lot of times people kind of limit that to your monetary portfolio, how much money you're giving, and it certainly encompasses that. But he says it's more. It's more. Every aspect of life is a gift that God has given to us to invest and to build up His kingdom. So he talks about the place where you live, your job, your weekends, your abilities, your education, yes, your money, your health, your family, your interactions with non-believers, the sufferings that you walk through. All of those things are given as a stewardship. So how are you taking all of that and leveraging it to invest in God's kingdom economy? That was the second point, was investing in God's kingdom economy. And so we saw the nobleman giving out, these minas to each of these servants, and some of them produce a return and some of them don't. And again, I think the point there is that God calls us to take all of our assets, our kingdom asset portfolio, and invest it to build His kingdom up. So that's what we looked at. We had a couple servants that came back. You had the good servants that produced a return, 10, fivefold, and then you had the wicked servant who came back and just basically said, I was afraid of the king, and so that's why I didn't do any investments. And then lastly, we talked about choosing to increase your investment. So maybe this can be a point of discussion here, Tim, now that I've kind of summarized that. Can you go to that kingdom asset portfolio, this pie chart? I was really proud of this one. I made this one here. So, oh my goodness, we lost the... that looks different than what I sent you. Now, it must be your computer, I guess. Hopefully you can see. Anyway, so this was your kingdom asset portfolio, and the 3 areas that I talked about were products, possessions, and position. And let me just summarize here. So products is your spiritual and natural giftings. The things that you have, your personality, your relational abilities, all of that is part of your products that you can go and invest to build God's kingdom. Then you have your possessions, and that's certainly your monetary wealth, your things like your home, your you have other properties that you want to bless people with. As far as letting them stay or whatnot. How can you leverage your possessions to bless people? And then lastly, there's your position, and these are your spheres of influence. So where you work, the people you're connected to, how do you leverage your position to bless others, to make a real kingdom impact for God's glory? So I had a few people tell me that was pretty helpful in terms of thinking how this investment thing is a little bit larger than just their money. So maybe my question for you guys is, so we did use you as an example as far as going to the mission field, giving and then going. Did you do anything like this as you were preparing to go to the mission field? Were you taking an inventory of not, okay, God's calling me, but how am I gifted, and did that somehow get you into Cambodia, into the type of work that you're doing?
Yeah, as we continue to walk down that process, one of the things that World Team recommended to us is to hold that idea with an open hand and to think through, well, what is it that we're looking to do? And if we have this idea and we're trying to cling onto it really, really tightly, God's going to have us go down the path that he wants us to. It's just a matter of, is he going to have to rip our fingers open, or are we going to be willing to keep the hand open and follow his leading and guiding? So as we've continued to walk down that process and look at it, different folks within World Team that knew us well or even got to know us, they were like, yeah, we could see you serving in this, or some of the kind of ministry before the ministry. So before coming to the mission field, I was a golf course superintendent working with a crew of 30 Costa Ricans. I didn't speak Spanish when I first started. So thinking about that experience and drawing on those experiences as continuing to go forward, right? So now I'm sitting here in the chair, and there's about 30 missionaries in the field in Cambodia, and figuring out how to have us all work together and going and utilizing some of that experience that I had gone through in the past. And they were not the elective courses. These were all the mandatory courses that I didn't choose to do oftentimes, So God's leading is not something that I was trying to go seek out or learn or better prepare myself for the future, because really it's just being flexible to that leading and guiding.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think sometimes when you start to explore what your giftings are, what your possessions are, your position and your possessions, God starts to reveal things that you probably didn't see. And so, I have a background in corporate finance, and I did not see myself as a discipler, as somebody who would be doing what I'm doing right now. But over time, as I was exploring that and seeking out with the Lord what he wanted me to do, it became very obvious that there was a natural ability for me to connect one-on-one in small groups with people. I don't like to stand up in front of large groups and preach. That's not a gifting that I have. But the Lord has shown me that, I can sit down and be very intentional in a conversation. And so that is a gifting I've been able to use within the ministry and walking alongside people. And I think, just even as I've been reflecting on our time in the States, we've seen people doing this even as a blessing to us. People have a gifting in hospitality, and they're willing to allow us to stay with them in their homes. We've had people let us borrow their car because we don't have a car to drive when we come back to the States. And so to enable us to serve, people are using their assets, their kingdom assets, to serve others. And it's just been a blessing to us as we've watched people give in different ways. People have given financially. People have given of their intercessory prayer and have told us how they pray for us daily. And those are all different ways that you can lean into your kingdom assets and use them to glorify the Lord in service to others around you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, thanks for sharing. So that was the message yesterday. If you want to see the more in-depth stuff, you can go back and look. We got John Bonaventura on the stage being the nobleman. So I was pretty pleased that he said yes to that. Thank you, John. And I got your brother up there. I thought he was going to cause a fight with John.
Yeah, I was waiting for it to happen. Although you almost had Dave Berquist, and then you sat him back down.
I did. You know what? I realized that Ben was over there, and I thought I almost had him come up, and I went over to Dave, and I realized I should have had Ben, so I felt bad. And then Dave came up later, and he said people were making fun of him because he got rejected. Didn't get to go up. So sorry, Dave. It was in the moment. It was in the moment.
Dave.
The first service, they were a little less interactive.
His son's getting married this week, I believe.
Dave Berquist?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Anyway, so thanks so much for everybody that participated. John played the nobleman, or you played one of the servants in the first hour. So, thank you so much for that. It was a fun parable. And next week we're moving on to the triumphal entry, and Dave's going to go further into that destruction of Jerusalem and Jesus weeping over Jerusalem, and we're moving into this new section of Luke as we conclude the gospel. So, thanks for hanging with us for the ride, and we're coming to the end here. All right, Tim, I think we are at the end of our time today, so do you want to do a little theology sprint? Did you come up with a missions one, or do you have one for me?
Yeah, I do. I think it is, I think all three of you guys might have a say in this one.
Okay.
Today's Theology Sprint question is, given the belief that God is omnipotent and omniscient, how do you justify the necessity of missions work when it implies that salvation is contingent on human intervention rather than solely on divine will?
Okay, so you're asking basically, since God knows all things, why do we need to engage in missions?
I think that's what the question's asking.
Okay.
There's a lot of words for that.
Tim likes to
It's
consult
like,
with
one more time?
Yeah.
Chat GPT, right? Was this a Chat GPT
Yeah,
question?
I wrestle with AI to come up with these.
How about this? Is AI going to be useful in mission work? Yeah, so I mean, maybe could you talk a little bit about, from your perspective, why is missions work so necessary? Like, why are you in missions work?
There's a lot of opportunity that you get to pour into people, and the relationship is so much more important than just leading with the gospel and trying to just kind of beat people over the head with it. So oftentimes we'll build that relationship, and when it continues to the point where there's an understanding, there's kind of a laying down of your natural defenses, and people are willing to hear you out. And even if you've got some kind of way, because oftentimes, within Cambodia, we have a lot of different types of ministry that's happening, and it gives us a little more credibility and a little bit more social capital, I'll say, so that we're able to share, and people will give you that ear to hear. And oftentimes I see so many things that are really good in this world are the things that we have to hold in tension. It's not black and white. And finding where we're going to land and kind of continuing to ebb and flow, and as that works and processes through, being in community, being in relation, because we're not just trying to find conversions. We're looking to have disciples who are multiplying disciples, who are in turn looking to plant churches that are reproducing. So that just takes so much social capital. It takes a lot of investment. It takes a lot of time, intentionality, really strong connections, understanding of language and culture to get to the point of you can equip others to continue to do that work. And we're called to go, and we're called to teach and make those disciples. Yeah. And knowing that, like the benediction that you had, as you finished it off, I continued the rest of the verse, and it's like, behold, and God will be with you always to the very end of the age. You know, it's like that's the piece that I hold on to as well, because I can think so many failings that are just not there for us that, God is going to work through us.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I was going to say it's an and. God is omnipresent and all-powerful, and he is capable of reaching everyone and bringing them into his kingdom. We all have that. We know that is truth. But at the same time, in Scripture, it tells us we need to go and make disciples, and that's the tension that you have to hold. And I think that's where you actually see the what's the word I'm looking for? I'm thinking of it in Khmer. The praising of the Lord in our works as we go forward in joyful obedience to what God is calling us to. As Tom's talking about learning language and all of these things, you can say, well, that's a lot of effort if God can just bring people into his kingdom. But we do it because it's in service to the Lord. It's honoring to him, and it's our created purpose is to glorify God. And if we're doing that by reaching others and bringing them into the global church and into God's kingdom, then, you hold that in balance with each other. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
And it's also part of that inventory that you talked about. As you read through that list, I was kind of, okay, yeah, that all makes sense. And then you get to that last point, and it was in your sufferings. And as I think through a lot of the people that we deal with in Cambodia, and maybe it's just, not being in the Western context, but I look at that list, and people have a lot of one of those things on the list, at least. So it may be a lot of suffering. And to be able to get to that point where you can use that to the glory of God, what a blessing. It's limitless. So if people are thinking, I only have so much resources or time or position or all those other things, be careful. God will grant you things that he'll use you and utilize you. But I see a lot of people that are willing and able to use their gifts and their time and being able to just be with people. It's not always just a dollars and cents kind of thing.
No.
So
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for helping us flesh that out. Really appreciate it. All right. Last thing, Tim, let's do a couple announcements, and then we'll be done for today. So what's coming up in the life of the church? Give me some slides up here.
Slide number 1.
Boom. There we go. So we have a summer schedule for kids that's beginning this coming Sunday, July the 7th. They're going to be meeting only at 10:45. So if you have kids and you bring them to 9 a.m., they're going to be sitting with you. There's going to be no kids programming at 9 a.m. They will be happening at 10:45. So that's what's coming up for the summer, and that's going to run until we get past Labor Day and we do our kickoff for the fall. So that's announcement number 1. Announcement number 2 is the shuttle has been temporarily suspended. So if you are a shuttle rider, I am sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but we will be looking to reevaluate and hopefully kick it back up in August. And certainly as we get into the fall when we'll have some new faces probably joining us. So that's what's going on for the shuttle. And Summer Connections is this coming Sunday. So if you like to eat, this Sunday is yours. Take a note of the dates on there. It's not going to be every single week. We do it 3 times over the course of the summer, but it will be this coming Sunday, July the 7th. As we begin our summer series, it'll be July the 21st, and then also August 4th. So you can remember the first Sunday in July and August we're eating, and then add in a little July 21st as well. But that's always a good time to connect, not just to eat, but to connect with people that are going to our church and maybe get to know some folks that you didn't. And it is only available after the second service. So if you come to the first service, feel free to come back and join us for the lunch. And I think that's all, right, Tim?
That's it.
That is all we have for today. And you know what? That's all she wrote on this episode of Behind the Pulpit. Thank you, Tom and Alicia. The Vosters are here, and we really enjoyed hearing from you. Hopefully
thanks
we'll
for having
see you.
us.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully we'll see you again soon, and we'll continue to be praying for the Lord to move in your ministry. All right. God bless. We'll see you back next week, and I think Pastor Dave will come back with a tan. We'll find out.